Welcome to the Middlesex Moments radio show. I'm Dr. Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College, and today my guests are Eunice Weisman and Rebecca Loew. Eunice Weisman lives at Covenant Village, and she was one partner in a partnership with Rebecca, who teaches sociology and social sciences here, that engaged our students in helping facilitate memoir writing and memoir thinking for residents at Covenant, and turned out to be a really robust partnership that had many, many benefits that you probably didn't anticipate from the beginning. So why don't we start with just sort of describing how the two of you work together and what your project has been.
Sure. This is Rebecca Loew, and we have, over the past 3+ years, developed a wonderful partnership with the number of the volunteers at Covenant Village of Cromwell. I was invited with my colleague Judith Felton to come and talk to the volunteer committee because there was an interest in having greater exchange of resources, ideas, expertise, perspectives between Covenant Village and the college, and with nothing necessarily specific in mind, but just wanting to start with a dialogue and brainstorm together. And a number of projects came from that. And maybe Eunice, you'd like to talk to some of those.
Yeah. When we started thinking about having this committee, which we call the Volunteer Committee and now is called the Community Partnerships Committee, my husband, Dick Weisman, decided to talk to Dr. Wasesha and see if there was something that could be done between Middlesex and Covenant Village, because when we moved in, he said, I miss young people. And he wanted to see if we could get students involved. And after he met with her and she decided, yes, she thought maybe this would be a good idea, we followed it up with a dinner with our CEO, Bert Johnson, at Covenant Village, and they talked about all the possibilities of doing a partnership, including liabilities, logistics, and so forth and so on. And by the end of the evening, everyone said, it's a go. And that was so exciting to me to see it happen so quickly. And so we followed up with your suggestion of Judith Felton as being the contact person, and she came over and brought Rebecca with her, and from there we just all brainstormed together. And the partnership with Rebecca came right along, and we just brought 4 residents each semester to her sociology of the family.
Yeah.
And the residents were to talk for 10 minutes each. And I happened to be on the first panel, my husband and 2 others, and it was interesting when you're over 80 to put all your life in 10 minutes. But maybe some of us went a little longer, but it was exciting. And it was exciting to hear the questions that the students asked. Because of the 4 of us that day, all of us referred to World War II, the influence in our lives. And I found that they were really interested in that. They wanted to know more. They also wanted to know how we parented and what we found worked and what didn't work, and how our marriages lasted, and if they didn't, what happened. And if they had children that they adopted, how did that work out? And can you think, Rebecca, of more things that came out of that?
Well, let me maybe back up and just sort of set the context for why we had the panel come in.
Well, let me just interrupt
sure.
you. And why don't we'll take a break here, and then we'll come back to the panel. Perfect. And why you set it up that way. So we'll be back in just a minute.
Okay.
Well, we're back. It's the Middlesex Moments radio show, and today my guests are Eunice Weisman, who lives at Covenant Village, and Rebecca Loew, who probably feels like she lives at Middlesex Community College, teaches social sciences here. And we right before the break, where you were going to start talking about your panel and how that came to be.
Right. So I teach a sociology of the family course, and it's a wonderful course, and in it we cover a number of aspects of family life, including the rapid change that we've seen in family form and what we expect from families and how families are put together, and changes in attitudes towards families and what we expect and how it has changed from generation born before World War II to the current millennial generation, which I now have a class of only millennials, and it's very interesting for me, as always, to learn from my students. So it's a course that draws students from a variety of interests. A number of them do want to go into human services fields, and some students take it because they just really like family and want to have some insight into how they can put together a really satisfying family for themselves someday. So for this course, I have an assignment that is due towards the end of the semester, in which I ask the students to imagine that they're 70, 75, looking back on their lives and writing a memoir, and that they are to prepare one chapter where they focus on their family and to imagine what their family life has been like, how it has unfolded, using course concepts and imagining that they are towards the latter stages of life. And it occurred to me that having this conversation with Covenant Village, why don't I invite some experts who don't have to imagine what their family life was like, but that can speak from experience and maybe model for the students some of the kinds of things to think about and consider, such as the relationship between historical events and how that had an impact on ideas about what people expected from their family, or the challenges that families and marriages had at different points in our history. So with that in mind, I contacted Eunice, and she was very helpful in pulling together a panel of 4 somewhat contrasting residents, including, as she said, herself and her husband Dick, to come and speak with the students. And at that point, that was what we envisioned the partnership would be. The challenge was that I said they each had 10 minutes to present their memoir, so we would have time for conversation and questions. And I think you could hear a pin drop as the panel talked about their lives and insights and comments and reflections from their vantage point looking backwards. And the students did have many questions, and there was definitely a sense at the end of that experience that people wanted more, that they didn't feel they were done, or they wanted to move on and say goodbye. And so I talked with my class, and then I think a few days later contacted you, Eunice, again and said, can we continue? And the idea then to have my students present their completed memoir, family memoir, to residents at Covenant Village seemed like the natural and wonderful option for us, and that's what we did, and it was wonderful.
So I'm really intrigued by this idea. So do the students reference historical events as they look backward, and what are those events?
I think some of the younger students, it's more challenging to sort of have that ability to step back and reflect on the connection between historical moments and how that had an impact on their families. But I do have students from all age groups typically in the course, and I definitely see that ability to look at historical trends or moments and how it had an impact on their lives, especially students who came of age in the 60s really will reflect in a way that's just wonderful, and I think it really gets the imagination and attention of their classmates when they talk about the changes in gender roles. And I remember a student said, well, I couldn't sit at a bar by myself as a woman, as a single woman in the 60s. It wasn't permitted. And just the attitudes and opportunities and constraints on women. And when those started to lift and thinking changed about gender roles, that had a huge impact on family. And some of that has come out definitely through our panelists. Right. But certainly we have, living experience among the student body as well.
Mm-hmm. I had to smile when the students came after another group of residents had given their talk, and they had talked how they tried to live on one salary and save. And when one of the students talked about their future, they said, my husband and I have started to save for a house. And this whole idea of saving came out in their plan, which pleased me to hear that they picked up on that and how important it is to think about the future. And I think one of the things that we realize when they come to visit us at Covenant Village, they know that we are not judgmental, and they share a lot. Mm-hmm. And it opens our eyes to what's going on right now. Mm-hmm. It's good for us. Our motto is, come learn with us. And this is exactly what's happening here. They're hearing our life, and we're hearing their lives. And it promotes better understanding on both sides, I think.
Tell me a little bit about Covenant Village, just in case people don't know.
It's a continuing care retirement village. You come in and there's a resident life. There are patio homes, there's cottages, and there's apartments. And then if you need more, there's assisted living, and then there's skilled nursing. So when you go to Covenant Village, you're taken care of for life. And we moved in 6 years ago, and we're happy because we feel safe there. We feel we've given our children a gift. We downsized. They don't have to worry about that. And they know when it snows, we're getting shoveled out, and if the dishwasher breaks, there's someone there to fix it. And yet they know that we're also having the opportunity to get involved in the community and expand our interests and have time for it, because we're not tied down with household requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, it has been great. We've met wonderful neighbors. They look after each other and share their interesting lives. And I've learned more about our neighbors by going to the classes and hearing them speak. And so Judith Felton, and I'd like to bring in that she started doing life stories with our residents. And she had students in her counseling class come and had them videotaped. And she got a grant for this. And then each resident that participated, and we've had 20 so far, get a copy of their interview to share with their families or whatever. And then they do a composite of all of the parts of all of them and show them to our residents. Mm-hmm. And we're hoping that they'll use that for incoming people who are interested in coming to Covenant Village.
Sure, yeah.
But
put the people's faces on the community so you know who's living there. Also, I don't know if you've ever been given this, but my husband received as a gift from my child a book of prompts so that he would write a memoir, and I think, apologies to him if he's listening to the show, I doubt that he's ever going to sit down and write the memoir, but she's curious. She wants to know the answers to those questions. So, but to do it on a video would be wonderful, because that's easier in a way.
It is, and then their children have that for whenever, you know. I was one, and my husband was one. I watched him do his, and it was interesting to me to listen to him tell his whole life, and then I did mine, and then we have those tucked away, and someday they can do what they want with them. But it's kind of nice to tell your story, and there's so many different stories at Covenant Village, just amazing where they've traveled and where they've gone and what hardships they've gone through, but they have worked through them. And one of the things that we shared with Rebecca's class is that you can make mistakes and you can move on. And I thought I wanted to do this, and then found out I didn't, and then I thought I knew what I wanted, and I didn't really know what I wanted. And so I think it's good for them to hear that.
I was wondering, well, after we come, we have to have another break. These things always, insert themselves just in the middle of a really good conversation. But as soon as we get back, let's pick up on exactly what you were saying. So we'll be back in just a minute. Well, we're back to the Middlesex Moments radio show and the last section of the radio program. So we have 11 short minutes. So it's our life in 10 minutes, right? We were talking over the break about the stories. Both of you were telling me amazing stories about this experience. But it started with this idea that the students were feeling that the seniors with whom they were talking were not going to judge them harshly. So let's just talk about, why is that such a healthy thing, and what did it create as a relation? It had an effect on the tenor of the relationship that went on in these classes and when they came to visit you.
I think they feel welcome in our home. That's what they call it, coming to your home. And I think the residents felt they wanted to hear their stories, and they wanted to hear everything, and let them know that. Go ahead and feel free to share with us. And there was one particular one that we were all moved on, of a young woman that said her grandmother, her mother, and she herself had been abused, and she wanted to put a stop to this. And her way of showing us the emotion that she felt about this was to hold up a picture of a chain that she had made, drawn, that was encased in plastic. And she took that and ripped it up with great difficulty and saying, I'm going to work to break this chain, and she's going to go into the field of helping people from abused families. There wasn't a dry eye in the room, but she said it and she did it beautifully, and we all welcomed her story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think, when the panel comes to the class, first of all, I know you rehearse them with a stopwatch. So they are mindful that they have a lot they want to say in a short amount of time. So I always have the sense that people have really been thoughtful and gotten right to the heart of the matter. And so the panelists share very candidly some of their struggles or regrets or triumphs, or how they sort of made peace with the way things turned out. Pathways they always envisioned or dreams they had that maybe didn't come to fruition, but how other opportunities were there and how they enjoyed that. And so the panelists are very candid with the students, very open, very positive, I find. And the groups that have come have just had very interesting lives, so they have a lot to offer, living all over the world and doing missionary work, or artists still running their businesses. And so I think that they have this experience of you all making assumptions that you're going to be received well in the classroom, and the atmosphere in the classroom is, I think, very respectful. Mm-hmm. And so when we go to your home to do that sharing, I too have been so proud of my students, so amazed at their strength and their poise in sharing some of the key elements of their lives, but also some of them are very young and they're imagining how their lives might have turned out, but being very candid and open and forthright. And I think that really reflects on feeling safe with the audience at Covenant Village.
So you're a sociologist. What have you learned in sort of meta trends as you've listened to your students? What are the things that really make an impact on their lives? I mean, by just simply choosing that this is what they're going to tell about.
Well, I find in some things aren't surprising, but I'm not a millennial, but I teach a lot of millennials, and we know from our surveys and some really quality research that they are less interested than any other generation in thinking about getting married or seeing marriage as essential to being happy in their lives. Most still plan on getting married, but more than any other generation, they don't consider it as necessary or key ingredient to happiness. In fact, they view having children as more essential to having happiness, and they don't necessarily need to be married to do that. And so I do see this trend to really thinking about, flexibility in the ties that they might have to somebody else. I'm not seeing divorce, for instance, necessarily as a failure, but rather as a vehicle that will, continue to allow them to be happy in their own lives. So not seeing sort of more traditional ideas about family and what family arrangements need to be in order for somebody, to have a satisfying life. So I think that is one of the things that's most salient to me, although I think a lot of the students come in the class thinking that diversity is just really important in terms of family forms, and reflects an improvement, unqualified. And so what we do in the class is say, there are trade-offs. Being single has these advantages and these possible challenges, and what might they be, and how do we do the things we want families to do, care for each other and care for children, and how do we look at, the fact that female-headed households are, with greater risk for poverty and struggling economically than others, and what do we do about that? So just to get them thinking about some of the ways of evaluating different family experiences and how they might serve the individuals and society as well.
So, and let me ask you, Eunice, as I'm listening to Rebecca talk about this, I'm thinking that people who've lived lives where they married and had children, and along the sort of traditional lines that used to define American families. So how do your peers process what they're hearing, and do they want to say, listen, this is this is what you ought to do, or this might be, you should think about it this way? Or?
Well, I think most of them have grandchildren, and they can relate to some of the issues that they've experienced with their own grandchildren, and maybe finding out that maybe there's not so different than what they're hearing too. But I feel that the residents just really care about what these students are thinking today. And I've heard several of them come to me and say, this has opened my eyes so much, and I appreciate the opportunity. I was nervous about going in and talking to them, but I wasn't afterwards. They made me feel comfortable in talking with them, and I wanted to hear what they had to say. And I said, well, will you please tell other residents that, so that when I go knocking on their door, they'd be willing to do it. And they have. They've shared that. And then I've heard residents say, I didn't know that about so-and-so, but they heard them when they went together, and they bonded. The residents bonded more. So it's been a win-win, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds wonderful. I to some degree, it seems like, well, there are gifts at every age, right?
Yeah.
And at the age, do you have to be a certain age to be at Covenant Village?
Yeah, well, I think it's
Roughly?
65 or older.
Sort of 65
yeah,
and
right.
older. Maybe you get to a point where you don't have to be so judgmental about things. You know, is it freeing?
Yes, it is freeing, yes. In fact, when you downsize, you get rid of that baggage, and you just kind of are yourself, and you can do and enjoy what you've been so busy with, all the things that life is asked of you. Of course, when we do get busy over there at Covenant Village,
Sounds like
too,
it. Yeah.
which I've loved. The challenge of this partnership committee has been so exciting to me, and even at our age, we like challenges, and we're not. I say we come to Covenant Village to live, not to die, and I think that's the way most people there feel. They just want a second chance. It's like a college campus almost over there.
Sounds like it.
And we meet to watch basketball, UConn basketball games. We get together and watch that, and we have concerts, and we have art, and we have so many different things that we can do together there, and as well as nice dining.
It reminds me of the old camp song about meet new friends but keep the old.
Oh, yeah.
One is
Yeah.
something silver and the other
Gold,
gold, right?
That's exactly.
Sounds like that.
We
yeah.
certainly have made a lot of friends there.
And I think, is it also the case then that the students might also feel a little bit more free about not judging each other and not judging themselves and trying to...
Yes, I think so. I think there's definitely that goes on. And I also, I was reminded early on, one of my my agenda for bringing the two age groups together was to sort of deal with some of the ageism that we see among young people. And I was saying to Eunice that I had forgotten about that goal, because it's not something we have to directly address. It's just the exchange and the interaction itself, really, I think, dispels some of those stereotypes that some of my students have about older people, and maybe some of the hesitation they had before the panel comes in, like what is this going to be about, and then they're really drawn in right away to the stories, and just realizing that very interesting lives. Some of the concerns that they might be having, these older people in front of them had the same kinds of concerns, and their life turned out just fine. And so just really seeing beyond the facade into the depth of the humanity in front of them, really, I think, is apparent immediately when the panel comes in, and has, I think, an important impact on the students. So.
In addition to this, Judith Felton brought to us Aging in America, the movie, that she shows in her classes, and she showed it and then discussed it with our residents afterwards. And I think it was interesting for her to see the reaction of our residents compared to her students. And so that's another partnership that we were doing. And Victor Triad came and talked about his book, one of his books. And so the partnership has been more than just this class.
Well, it's lovely to look back, to 2012 when I met Dick, your husband, and tell the story of what's unfolded in those years since we had that first conversation. So
Yeah,
thank
true.
you both for being my guests on this show today. And to the listening audience, if you want to learn more about social sciences here at Middlesex Community College, you can contact Rebecca Loew. You'll find her email address in our directory, which is located on our website, which is located on the World Wide Web at mxcc.edu. And if you want to find out more about Covenant Village, you can probably just look it up
Covenant
online.
Village does have a website, and I'd always be happy to forward anything. People wanted to contact me also.
Okay. Well, and they can probably contact you through me, and then I will. And my email address is also in the directory at the college, and then I'll send it on to you.
Well, thank you for inviting us here. I really appreciate that, and I loved sharing with Rebecca.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's been a great show.
Thank
so
you.
Thank you both.
Yes.
And to our listeners, I hope you all have a wonderful day.